Hi everyone, welcome to Ben's Business Podcast, episode number 53. Today I've got my guest Sam Forsberg, who I've just discovered lives just 6 miles away from me, and we both attend the same ToastMasters together, which Sam runs herself. So the reason I brought Sam on today is because I've got a lot of admiration for the fact that she's built up the ToastMasters to 20 plus members. What's the exact number?
24 at the moment.
24 members of our Dunfermline ToastMasters club, and we've known each other and started our businesses around the same time, and we've been bumping into each other on and off for a long time. Welcome Patrick, thanks for joining. And Sam also runs workshops. She's mastered her public speaking. I've witnessed her leadership in her public speaking in person, and that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on today, Sam. So
thanks, Ben.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is a first for me. I've never done a Facebook Live before, so delighted to be here sitting on the couch with you.
Yeah, and this is my first live interview. I've done interviews in person. I've done many interviews through the internet, but this is my first, so it's a first for both of us. As you can see, we changed the studio as well. I've got the Christmas tree in the background. For those listening on the podcast, you can't see that, unfortunately. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about, Sam, is about like leadership and showing up to the Toastmasters and running all these workshops in between that, because Toastmasters is really just your side thing that you do. What is that leadership, and what drives you to show up and do that every day?
That's a great question, Ben. Thanks. I think for me, leadership in part is leading by example. Mm-hmm. It's also about creating something that other people want to be part of. So whether that is a vision for your business that you want your customers to buy into, or you want your staff to buy into, whether it's Toastmasters, getting people in the community to buy into that, or even just something that you personally want to achieve, I think it comes back to being really clear about why it's important, what the meaning behind it is, and then really just showing up and doing so consistently so that you're inspiring other people to come along for the journey. Yeah,
and that's exactly what I've seen. Like, I'm using Toastmasters as the best example because I've seen you, we see each other every fortnight at Toastmasters, and there's times I can't make it, but every time I come, you're always there. And that's one of the main things I really admire is that when you commit to something like this, you do have to follow it through. So it helps to have that structure in place for first, but it's the idea that you show up and you're organised every week, every fortnight, and it's great to see. So like, that's why I brought you on, because there's a lot of talk about and training about leadership and things, but what I'm bringing to the table here for everyone is someone who's actually doing it. There's a big difference when you read things in books, and then the person might not actually be doing the conduct of actually living the words that they say. So Sam's a great example of she actually doesn't talk about leadership very much, but that's what I want to talk about today. And bring that out through someone who's actually doing it. What is leadership to you?
I think effectively it's about creating a vision and enrolling other people in that vision so that the vision itself becomes the most important thing.
Yeah.
And for me, with Toastmasters, what I really get a buzz out of with that, and similarly with my businesses, is that I'm empowering people to grow themselves, grow their confidence, grow their public speaking ability, and to step up themselves into leadership roles as well. Because if I was trying to hang on to it and control it and run it all by myself, it wouldn't ever have gotten off the ground. So it was really about opening the doors, welcoming people in, and creating a team where everybody feels like they can contribute. And I think the Toastmasters model really lends itself to that, because everybody volunteers for different roles each meeting, and we've got the committee roles as well that allow people to step up and take on more leadership responsibility. But fundamentally, I had to create the vision for what I wanted the club to be like, and then attract people in so that they wanted to be part of it. And I think that letting people do that in their way is one of the most important parts of it. So you've got to let go of the control a bit in order to be a leader.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, because I joined just naturally because I'd heard about Toastmasters, and that's interesting. You've touched on that point of like almost attracting people to it rather than needing to persuade them to join. They have to have a want as well.
Yeah.
So everyone has a why, I guess, especially when they get into something like Toastmasters or personal development. So one of the reasons I wanted to join is because I have a big 10-year hairy audacious goal, I think you called
Yep.
it. What did you call that?
A BHAG.
A BHAG.
Hairy audacious goal. That's not my acronym.
Yeah.
I stole that from somewhere else, but
Yeah.
it's one I love.
Yeah, Sam reminded me about that one. So I call them definite major purposes, and I have like which was from Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, and like one of my definite major purposes is to like master marketing, master communication, and the reason I would need the two of them is because like you can learn all the skills, but you have to be able to communicate it,
Yeah.
and that's a large part of marketing as well. So they go hand in hand. So I had a massive purpose to and I'm very committed to that, and I'm very driven. Then when I found out about Toastmasters, I just wanted to go for this big goal that I set for myself, and there just happened to be one along the road. I found out that you ran it, and I knew Sam very well at that point, so it was the obvious next step just to join and get involved. And the inspiring thing about Toastmasters as well, once you go for your own reasons, but then when you go, you find new reasons to keep going, like the community, the community idea of how you see other people who are started where you were when you first joined, and you've got all these ums, ahs, and you're very embarrassed about like just your speaking ability, and then eventually you become just like the people that inspired you to keep going, and they tell you their story of when they started at your level, and that community environment helps you see that success is possible by being with other successful people who have been in the same situation.
Definitely.
And that's what I love about Toastmasters itself. So how did you, again, you touched on that you have to allow people to have their own reason to want to come, but how did you grow your Toastmasters group from like nothing up to 25? Is there 20?
24. I think we'll be 25 very soon. So.
We'll call it 25.
Yeah. Nice number.
We'll call it 25. So how did you grow your Toastmasters group to 25 members for like people maybe just wanting to start a Toastmasters group in their own area?
I think there are a couple of things that have been important to that journey, and again, it hasn't just been my effort because I couldn't have done it without other people getting themselves involved as well. But for me, I felt really strongly that I wanted to give people the opportunity to experience it. So we all know that public speaking is one of the top 3 most feared things in the world, next to death and something else, but public speaking is right up there for most people. And even if somebody's an experienced public speaker, typically you still get some kind of nerves or anxiety before you go and do a talk or address an audience or even do a Facebook Live. And so one of the biggest things is helping them overcome that initial fear. You know, just walking in the room, just introducing yourself, saying your name, or you know what's brought you to the meeting, for example, can make such a difference if people feel welcome and it's a safe, inclusive environment for them. So I think first and foremost, creating that starting impression is fundamentally important, and that applies to business as well. It also applies if you're out there socially looking to meet people, and you know that first impression, that connection that you create with them is really important too. So I think fostering that environment and making that almost like the culture, you know, that's what we're renowned for. You know, Dunfermline Toasties are super proud of our spirit and the environment that we've created, so that when people do come along, typically they want to join and be part of it because they've felt so welcome, so safe, and so they've enjoyed it so much more than they thought they would for something that perhaps has started as a real fear. So I think that's firstly part of it. And then we've used a few different techniques for trying to promote the club. So actually Facebook meetup group, we've got a fantastic acting Vice President of Public Relations, which is a bit of a stumbling block, that title, and she's been doing a lot to get the club mentioned in the local newspaper and things like that I certainly wouldn't have managed to do all of that myself if it was just me, but those little things consistently done just start letting people know about it, and I think that really helps so that we're starting to get people through the door, but then we're actually making them really want to be there and to come back because we've made the welcome so successful.
Okay. Yeah, so we've actually got an opening night in January, which I put up here just to remember about the date. So that's on Thursday the 10th.
It is, yes, absolutely.
Of January. And so if anyone's local to us, near Dunfermline or Fife or even Edinburgh, come across for the open night, and you can get an experience of Toastmasters yourself.
Definitely.
And if you're not in Scotland or anywhere near us, if you're watching on live, obviously get along to an open night or just go as a free guest and find someone who goes to Toastmasters. It's just so good for your networking skills and public speaking. It's got so many benefits, so just try it and learn about it for yourself.
Absolutely. There's bound to be a club somewhere near you, so it's certainly worth giving it a try. And I think it's one of those things that's hard to explain. You've got to experience it, because I kind of describe it a bit like a sprinkle of magic.
It's the spirit within the group, like you're saying, and all the groups have a different spirit and different feeling. It's like when you go travelling to a new country and you can't explain it, but it's you've got that feeling in the room. So you get that as well as building your public speaking skills and the confidence of just getting out the house and getting away from your family for a minute. That, like, it can be whatever your purpose is to get up and get out and meet some new people. Is good for all those purposes, and you get additional benefits off the back of it. So that's like, I didn't even plan on doing a pitch about Toastmasters, but it's just the love of it, so I recommend it. The other thing is about, like, back to leadership and adversity. How do you give some examples of, like, even running Toastmasters is a great example, but in your workshops and public speaking situations as well, what kind of adversities have you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
Another fantastic question, and it's interesting actually, because one of the things you said at the start in the intro was how you admired the fact that I always turn up and I'm always there helping to run the meetings in the club. And I think there are actually times genuinely where it's like, no, I don't want to go. You know, and I'm feeling crap, or I'm under the weather, or I'm tired, or I'm distracted by other stuff. And you just sort of sit there and think, God, this is the last thing I want to be doing. And the reality is that because I believe in it so much, I go anyway. So there is an element of that self-discipline, because the why is so clear. I love the community. I think it helps so many people, that if I don't show up, then it's not just myself I'm letting down, it's everybody else as well. And the funniest thing is, no matter how crap I feel before I get there, I'm guaranteed that I will always leave that meeting feeling a million times better, having had a fantastic evening. So even if I've gone in with a really bad headache, which I did at the last meeting, I came away with, jaws sore from having laughed and smiled so much, feeling amazing and energized again. So I think that's one of the things that it's taught me, is that it doesn't matter how you're feeling, you've just got to show up when you're in that sort of leadership role. You don't let excuses get in the way. Another area is health-wise. We were having a bit of a discussion before coming online, and I mentioned that I fundamentally believe that your health is so important to you, and we tend to take it for granted until something goes wrong that threatens it. And I've had quite a few situations over my life where my health has had some really big knocks. And a couple of years ago, because I run a few businesses, as well as the sort of getting the Toastmasters Club up and running, I got really unfit. I'd been not doing any exercise. I'd been sitting very sedentary at my desk. I'd put on a load of weight because I hadn't been watching what I was eating, and I got really run down. And I was absolutely floored for 5 weeks just with a common cold. I couldn't even say that I had the flu. This was Christmas 2 years ago now, year before last. And effectively that had a massively detrimental impact on my business. So not only did I then have, the impact of having been sick for 5 weeks, having to try and recover from that, but having taken so many steps backwards in my business, lost clients and everything, that I was really reminded of something I fundamentally believed from the start, is that you can't have a successful business if you don't have good health.
Yeah.
You've got to put your health first. So I made a commitment. I got really clear on that why of, if I want to run a successful business, I must look after my health.
Okay.
And I took up running, which is the last thing in the world I'd have ever expected to do. And that's talking as somebody who's got a permanent back injury, which I've had since I was 18.
Yeah.
I'm severely asthmatic whenever I exercise, and I honestly haven't run, unless it was to cross the road quickly, in 20 odd years. So I didn't think running was possible, because I thought it would upset my back, aggravate the injury. And yet I eased myself into it. The why was so strong that I kept going, even when I didn't want to get out of bed on a cold morning, or when it was raining outside, or whatever it was. It was so important that I really took to it. I stuck with it. And I'm nearly 2 years into running now. I started in January of 2017.
Yeah.
And I've done 59 park runs, which is a 5k run on a Saturday morning.
Okay.
I've done about 3 10-kilometre races. I've done quite a few other 5 mile or 5k races.
Yeah.
And for me, it's fascinating, because I had all the excuses, all the reasons not to do it, but because my why was strong enough, I made myself do it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though, because actually I haven't done as much training over the last few months, and I was reflecting on this the other day, because I really want to get that back in.
Yeah.
And I realised the difference between the last 6 months and the previous 18 months is that previously I'd had certain races or events that I'd booked in, that I'd registered for, that I wanted to go and do. So you've always got that motivation of, I know that 10k is coming up, I better get some extra training in.
Yeah.
I haven't had any races or anything booked in proactively for 6 months now.
Right.
And so of course the momentum and the drive on the training has petered off. So I've already booked a race for February, middle of February, and I've got a double park run booked on New Year's Day, so I'll be getting up extra early to do a 5k in Kirkcaldy, and then drive to Dunfermline and do a 5k there as well. So starting the year how I mean to continue.
Yeah, and wins saying Tough Mudder as well.
Oh yeah. That was one of the big things. I've always fancied myself a bit of an army commander, you know, when you're younger and you think you're completely invincible. And so it's always been something that I've wanted to go and do. And again, the back injury and everything else, just never ever thought it would be possible. And so that was one of the things I booked in for myself. Nobody else had wanted to do it with me, and I was like, right, I'm super excited about getting money and running around all these obstacles, so I'm just going to go myself anyway. And usually people get teams together, and I didn't let that stop me. Win came along as my support crew, so he didn't actually participate as such, but he was following me around because he had to hold my asthma puffer and everything. And
good man.
Yeah, I just met up with people along the way, so we helped each other, because a lot of the obstacles you can't do by yourself. I met some fantastic people. I had an absolute ball. There were some bits that were a bit hairy, scary, and some bits that were quite challenging. Yeah. But actually, to have achieved that when it's something that I never in my wildest dreams would have imagined was possible is so liberating. And I think that's the thing that running has taught me, is that whenever I'm exhausted or I'm out of breath or I've got sore legs or I think I can't go any further or any faster, you've always got a bit more in the tank.
Yes.
You can always push that bit further than you mentally think you can.
Yeah.
And so at the end of most runs, probably 95% of runs, I will do a little sprint down the last sort of 100 metres or so. And you know, whether it's at the end of a 5k or a 10k, I always push to do that little bit of a sprint at the end, because it's just that constant reminder that actually you might feel like you're totally done in, but you've always got that little bit more that you can achieve. Yeah. So it's really liberating to realise that we're only limited by what we believe we can do.
Yes. And
that's a way I remind myself constantly that I can always push on a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think Earl Nightingale talks about that you've got a second wind and then you've got a third wind. That's the term he uses, and it's the idea that like you come to the end of the, like work wise, you come to the end of the day at 5 o'clock where most people crash because they've pushed themselves all day. That you can always find that extra time to go to Toastmasters in the evening or run a workshop in the evening. and you at the time it's all in the mind.
Yeah.
And then when you go through that, you start to build that momentum and confidence that actually it is possible to keep going and go not just second time but a third time later on. So I find that when I push myself enough, I keep it. You can keep getting wins, and you keep that momentum going from early on. And you have to keep that momentum, or you completely lose it.
Yeah, definitely.
But you talked about the idea of you made a point about the fact that like you've got all these people holding you accountable in a way, like 25 other people, and you can't, like, when you're organising, you're the leader of that. It's about adversity. Like, you've got that adversity, but you just have to suck it up in a way and go. And I know the feeling of that, like, where I put myself in a lot of situations, like coming on Facebook Live every week because I've publicly committed to myself to that. And it's not easy. There's things that get in the way, and internally and externally.
Yep.
And moving the studio in here very quickly while you got here was not easy, but we wanted to get the Christmas tree in. It's a must. And I find that is very having that idea of a bigger purpose in yourself is what really helps you get through most of adversities. When it can be others, or it can be a cause that you've got in your strong why. So that we could probably talk about that. About, you were telling me you were learning about things at Action Coach.
Yeah.
Tell me what you were learning about that, about why the vision and the purpose is so important.
I think anybody who's looked at any sort of dream planning, goal planning type stuff has probably come across the idea that you really need to start with that vision.
Yep.
And when it comes to our businesses, usually we go into business or go into working for ourselves because there's some reason, whether it's something that we want to achieve, whether it's the idea of financial freedom or being our own boss, whatever that is, creating a kind of right future for our families. There's something that usually drives us to take that step into business. And yet actually it's very easy to get caught up in the doing and the busyness and the ups and downs that come with the journey.
Yes.
And we often lose sight of why we started it in the first place.
Yes.
And sometimes actually the why we might outgrow it, and we might need to revisit it and go, you know what, actually I need a bigger purpose. I loved what you said about what was it
definite
that you called
major
it?
Purpose?
Definite major purpose. And I think that's a lovely phrase for it.
It's definite, it's major as in big,
Yeah.
and it's a purpose, so it's all three of them. But just goals is just not exciting enough.
No, absolutely. You've got to have something that's so much bigger than you. And I think when they really get inspiring, and this is where Toastmasters comes in, is that actually you need other people to help you achieve it.
Yes.
You couldn't go to Toastmasters Improve Your Public Speaking without the benefit of the evaluations that you get from other people, for example. In a sense, your customers give you the opportunity to have that in your business as well.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I've had some ups and downs in business this year.
Okay.
And one of the reflections looking back on the year has been that I've kind of lost touch with my purpose of my why.
Okay.
So I need to go back and revisit that and get clear on what it was that really drove me to want to achieve the things in my business that I did, that inspired me to get into it and reconnect with that, and probably grow it a bit more so that it really becomes that driving force, so that I do continue to do things that I need to do when I don't feel like it.
That's the thing. It's doing what you don't feel like doing sometimes, and that's easier said than done. And fears and pains and things are just they are a lot of the time they're in the mind, and it's getting around that you have to let yourself shine through that fear and pain, and even whatever it is, stress, and show up, and when you show up, usually it works out. Sometimes there is failure.
Yep.
There is failure. Sometimes things happen that you're disappointed about, but all you have to realise is every time you fail as well, it's just one step closer to bigger successes, because failure is proof that you're trying.
Yeah.
And that, I just wanted to touch on that side as well, that like there is adversity, and in my experience there's adversity that ends up causing failure. Like we've kind of went into that there is dips in business, there's dips in your speaking career and things happen with your health and family, and you've got to bounce back and keep the definite major purpose and the vision focused. Or when you lose that and you have those dips, and you don't have that to latch back onto, you don't bounce back up, and you stay down for too long and you lose momentum. So I just wanted to touch on that as well.
I think one of the things that I've recognised, and if you'd asked me even 2 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to say this, but I think one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years is that what makes the biggest difference is community. Yeah. So obviously with Toastmasters, we've already talked quite a bit about how amazing that community is. And it's not just our club. There's Toastmasters clubs all over the world, and we've got quite a bit of interaction with other clubs in Scotland and that sort of thing. And so actually just turning up to see those people, even if I don't feel like going along or don't feel like giving a speech or whatever, the people are a big part of what drives me then, and I get re-energized by seeing the progress that they make. And Action Coach similarly is a fantastic community, and I've had 3 full-day events over the last week that have been related to Action Coach, which is my business. I'm a franchise owner with Action Coach, and seeing the other coaches, there's a fantastic team of us in Scotland who I absolutely love being around. Seeing the clients that we're helping and the progress that they're making, the impact it has on their lives, that always energizes me so much. And yet when things get difficult, naturally, and I'm sure there are other people like me, I tend to start withdrawing myself from things. I stop going to as much networking or to as many events, reaching out to people, that sort of thing. And yet actually it's when I'm in that community that I feel so much stronger and so much more inspired. And the running is exactly the same, because Park Run has been a phenomenal movement for the last 12 years or so, again spreading worldwide now, and it's inspired so many people to get into some kind of exercise. It's not just about running, you can walk it. We have people pushing buggies, we've had people in wheelchairs, people on crutches going around, everything. So it's not about any kind of race or anything like that particularly, unless you want to be one of the fastest and that's what motivates you. For the rest of us, it's just about a way to get active with a group of like-minded people. And again, even if I don't feel like running, I had a Christmas night out on Friday. I'd arranged to leave early, specifically so that I could be home, get sleep, and go to Park Run in the morning. And it all went to pot, as plans sometimes do. So best laid plans are mice and men. And I ended up, instead of getting home at 10:20 at night, I got home at 20 past midnight after making my other half run around trying to save me from the train system. But despite that, I still got up early and went to Dunfermline to do the park run. Not because I felt like it, not because I was happy when the alarm went off, but because I wanted to go and see those people in the community, and I knew I'd feel better for doing so. And again, if your why is big enough, if you can enroll a community in it with you that wants to help you achieve that, then that will help you get through those tough times when things don't exactly go right. And I think we have a saying in Action Coach, which if any of you have come across our webinars or any of our workshops before, then you'll perhaps be familiar with the saying that the only failure is the failure to participate. Because fundamentally, the only one that can change anything, change the results we're getting, change how we feel, change what we're choosing to do and the habits we have, are ourselves. So actually any other version of failure is just a stepping stone to getting it right next time and working towards what we want. It's the pain of discipline or the pain of regret, and the pain of regret's much heavier. So you don't want that. So take that advice. That's great advice. It looks like Kevin Kitt from Toastmasters or Dunfermline ToastMasters Club's joined us here, and Alan Martin, thanks for joining. You are running workshops together, I'm sure. Absolutely. And that actually perfect timing, perfect cue. Alan, thanks for that. So the one of the other questions I have, and I was very curious on top of what actually made this happen, was I had a question about, because I'm very curious about starting workshops, which I plan on starting my own workshops in marketing, even mindset and all the things that I've been learning.
that I want to share with the world and around the UK to start with is, how do you run workshops? That's the basic question that I had, and I was hoping to get some answers today.
Excellent. I think you've got to, again, think about why it's important to you to do it, because if you've got the why, you'll make everything else happen. And whether it's because of a why that's driven by your business and a commercial aim or goal that you're going for, or whether it's because you've got a particular message that you really want to share with people, whatever that reason is, get clear about that first. And I think that there's a few different elements to it. I love the kind of brainstorming creative part of, I've got something I want to share, how would I shape this into a workshop? And I think we'd actually planned to do a session together where we were mapping something out. I think the next thing is being able to, going back to right at the start when you were talking about communication and marketing.
Yes.
And I think all of life is about communication, not just communicating in business or through marketing, but communicating with our friends and our family, communicating in difficult situations, but also actually communicating with ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And I think these are all skills, fundamental life skills that we don't necessarily get the chance to develop unless we actively go and seek those opportunities. Yes. And so thinking about a workshop, or how are you going to market it, you've got to think about what is it you're trying to help people achieve, how will you communicate that, who's your target audience. So you've got to work through all of these things. And one of the things I've loved most about workshops and training that I've done this year has actually been working with Alan. So I'm really delighted that he's joining us. That's not why I'm saying it, because again, when you're working with somebody else on that, you each bring your own strengths to it, and it becomes such a much better experience and a much better event for you and the other person and your audience, because everybody benefits, and I love any kind of win-win-win scenario. Yeah,
no, that's a great idea, and that I'm potentially partnering up with Alan to do the workshops as well, because it's a way to leverage the skills of other people as well, and that's very important. So the other question I have on top of like running workshops and things that was really helpful, is like, because you've been involved in Toastmasters, you literally started your own Toastmasters club. On the topic of public speaking, for anyone that's wanting to get into just even practicing their public speaking, maybe not have a goal of being an international speaker, but for someone who's got that fear of public speaking, what's your number one tip to them? You maybe a different one that we've not heard before. Your kind of unique number one tip that you can give people on public speaking at that stage.
Fantastic question.
Very specific.
I feel like I'm doing a table topic session where it's all about impromptu speaking. Great life skill, especially for interviews, whether it's business interviews, podcasts, or job interviews even. So
the table topics is like impromptu speaking, when people ask you random questions and you have to stand up and practice that at Toastmasters in front of a group. So
definitely.
That's what we're doing here.
I think that usually what I would say the most important thing is breathe. Remember to breathe. You know, it might sound really silly and we tend to not think consciously every time we take a breath. But the reality is, when we get nervous, particularly if we're thinking about something that terrifies us, like getting up in front of a group of people and speaking, then we tend to kind of really restrict our breathing and either stop breathing or breathe shallowly and that sort of thing. And so I think that really helps. It's also a fantastic way to practice cutting out the ums, ers, ahs and those sorts of filler words, because you're taking a breath and pausing briefly instead of trying to fill the space with a sound that doesn't actually add to what your message is. But I think if I was going to choose my unique take on it, for me, I've always pushed myself to speak in public. And the reality is, actually, I used to be absolutely terrified by it. I remember being in high school and standing in front of the assembly at the quadrangle, because our assemblies were usually outside in Australia, given the nicer weather, and having to address 700 odd people in my school. And I'd even put myself forward for the debating team, the mock trial team, and I ended up as vice captain of the school kind of leadership group. And despite that, I would step up to that stage and I would be shaking like a leaf.
Yeah.
Literally, my knees would be knocking together. And I would deliver whatever it was I was going to say, usually reasonably off the cuff.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody would come up to me afterwards and go, "Oh my God, Sam, you were so confident. You looked fantastic.
Yeah.
That was so amazing." And I'd be like, "Didn't they see you shaking?"
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that nobody else saw the
Yeah.
nerves and how it made me feel. So for me, it was really genuinely about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, but giving myself so many opportunities just to get in there and do it.
Yeah.
Where I think I turned a corner from still fearing public speaking to learning to love it was when I got super excited about the message I wanted to share. And therefore, again, that why overtook the fear in my brain and actually made me just go, "You know what, I so want to share this message with people, I'm just going to do it." And the more that I got into it, the easier it felt, the more I enjoyed it. And I still get a little bit of nerves occasionally. However, for me, it's always now an opportunity rather than something to be scared of.
Yeah. And is it like a practice that reducing your fears and anxieties, is that do you think you build a muscle for feeling the fear and doing it anyway? It seems to be a trend of what we're talking about, like in both leadership and public speaking, is it's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Does that get any easier?
Honestly, I'm not sure it does.
Sorry.
In some ways.
Reality.
I think the reality is that certain things get easier. But my view on life is that we're really here to constantly improve, to learn, to grow, to that lifelong journey effectively. So a bit like I was saying, you might start with a why, maybe you need to reconnect with your why, really tie the emotion back into it, or maybe you actually just need to evolve your why, create, establish something bigger, really give yourself something extra to aim for. And I think because we are naturally designed to do that in life, we're always looking to evolve, to move forward, to improve ourselves. We're always pushing ourselves to the next level. So actually, you're always still coming up against those fears and those challenges and those hurdles, because that's how we grow.
Yes.
We don't grow inside our comfort zone. We've got to keep pushing that boundary. And I think that's something that I've always loved doing, is challenging the status quo, pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. So it doesn't make it any less scary. It doesn't make it any easier.
Right. Yeah.
But when you naturally go, "You know what, that's an opportunity to do something that terrifies me, or that's an opportunity to do something I don't believe I can do," well, damn well, go and try it. Because without trying it, you'll never know if you could do it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. And it's, to be honest, you've reminded me about that it's so true. That things don't actually get easier. You just keep improving and working on yourself so that you can learn to deal with with life and like the natural life. It's just, life is hard, and you have to deal with it and find ways to deal with it better. And I always recommend, one, reading books about the problems that you're having, and so self-help, help yourself. That's what self-help books are. They're helping yourself, and you can do that not just with books, but the whole idea of helping yourself is living life, pushing yourself in life, and whatever you try to do, coming up with adversity, problems, and then eventually being stopped in your tracks. And then that's the point where you either retreat and like just stop, or you can then study and figure out things and attend workshops, come to Toastmasters, read books to overcome those hurdles. And there's so many ways to get better, that it's not the, like I think Tony Robbins says, it's not the lack of resources, it's the lack of resourcefulness. So you have to just take the challenges on head first, and then eventually you'll have a major challenge, and it's going through that and overcoming all of these challenges, and you get better, I think, by being out in the field, not just studying, but studying and being out in the field, and then studying. It's like you have to go back and forward, because there's times where like just going head first and making loads of mistakes is not the easy way, because personal development is like the shortcut in a way. You're learning from other people's adversity and their pain, and you're just learning from that, so you can kind of take some leaps forward. So a bit of both of action and learning, and learning, and that's why we're so involved in. You've just finished running our workshop, but you attend Toastmasters, I guess, for your own personal development. You've got your own mentors and coaches, I would guess.
Yeah.
And I've got the same here. Like, this podcast is for my own personal development, even though I'm sharing some things that I know on the podcast when I go solo. The reason I'm doing more guest interviews is because I want to learn from you. I want to learn from the people I admire who are doing things bigger than me, or they're doing things that I've not yet to do that I want to do, and that's where a lot of my inspiration comes for creating this podcast, is just learning from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk so much about learning and the importance of learning within the Action Coach systems. And in fact, we've been talking about dreams and goals, and you can't create the plan and take the action without some learning in there in the middle of it, because you don't necessarily know how to do all of the things that you need to do in order to actually achieve the goal. If it was something that you already knew how to do completely, then it wouldn't be a goal, it would just be a to-do list. So you know, there'll be an element of learning, whether that's learning how to technically do something, like I'm really impressed with your arranging the lights and things here, Ben. or whether it's learning about how to be a better version of yourself, or a better leader, or a better communicator. And I think when I was at a business planning day yesterday with some Action Coach clients, one of the questions that came up, because we were emphasising the importance of learning and building in time to give yourself a chance to learn, because otherwise we end up so busy that it's one of the first things to kind of get pushed aside. And the question was, well, when do you stop learning and start doing? And I think, as you said, there needs to be the right balance there. So my view on that is to use what I call the just-in-time learning approach. So I've got bookshelves and bookshelves filled with business books. I've got a big Audible account with loads of audios. And actually, whilst I've read a lot of them, I've listened to a lot of them, there's a lot there that I haven't yet necessarily picked up and read or taken in. However, I could read for the rest of my life, literally. And that wouldn't help me. I'd be a hell of a lot smarter, but I wouldn't necessarily be any more successful. So I think for me, it's about what exactly is it that I need to learn right now just to move that next step forward. And I think that helps, because I used to believe how silly these things are that we get into our heads sometimes. I used to think if I picked up a book, I had to finish it. I had to read the whole lot. And actually, well, who says that's the case? Why can't you pick up a book and maybe just read a couple of chapters and get what you need from it and go and implement it?
Dip into it,
And then maybe the next step you need something else, a different learning, book or a resource to help you with that next step. And I think that when we can be flexible like that as well, it's not about just cramming our heads with stuff. It's getting the right thing at the right time and going and doing something with it.
I agree, because there was a point where I started my business and I actually just took action. I didn't learn anything. I'd obviously been learning some stuff from the courses that my dad had been watching and taking that in subconsciously. And then I came to those hurdles that were completely stopping me, and I wasn't feeling like I was getting ahead. So I kind of got to a point of felt like I was giving up, or like losing hope for what I was doing. So then I went and turned to books, and Jim Rohn kind of inspired me with a sentence saying, I think it was along the lines like there's nothing worse than being stupid, and he was on the idea of gathering knowledge. So he says gather it all up, because there's nothing worse than being stupid. You have to go through the laborious process of gathering it all up, and that kind of inspired me, got me into all this reading, and then I went overboard on that. So I kind of went both ways, and you can do it's what it's called paralysis by analysis, by over reading, over going to too many workshops, and not even creating your own style. If you're trying to do like speaking, for example, it's good to go to workshops to learn from how, like, get some speaking styles and things, but you have to bring that back and then get into your own creative space and then produce from your genius, not from literally copy and paste from other people. You have to use that for inspiration, use knowledge just to think. But I've been on both sides of this scale. I was so ignorant, naive when I started my business, and then I went into overdoing it and basically making myself feel anxious because I had so much information and I wasn't taking any action. So I was kind of like stuck in this, like I was heavy. It felt like I was heavy.
Yeah.
And my head was full, and there was no movement and energy, and that's where I got to a point. So it's the learning and action, and it's funny how, like, I asked you that question. I didn't know I knew you had been reading books, but for everyone, it's never a surprise to me anymore that I assumed that you read a lot of books and you've been to lots of workshops, because it's very hard to get to levels where you are and speaking and running workshops and leadership without learning from other people.
Yeah.
So and that's such an amazing lesson just there, that the fact that you put so much into yourself. And I see people like Grant Cardone, who's another person who I plan on getting on this podcast as well, and he's doing very well in business. And one thing I've noticed is he's doing a podcast and talking to people higher than him.
Yeah.
So I look at people and I bring them on my podcast that I find are successful high achievers, and I always find that they're also doing the same for the next step up, and then they've got the next step up and they're talking about the ultra successful, and it all kind of comes down in a step. So we're all just going up steps. So just find the person on the step above you.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I wanted to share with everyone. I think we're out of time for today. Thanks so much for coming along. It was only a 6-minute drive, so we should probably do this
brilliant.
again.
Absolutely. Can I share 2 last things though,
go.
Because they tie in really well with what you just said. And Brad Sugars, who founded Action Coach, says that you can't out-earn your learning.
Yes.
So you will only ever be able to earn in accordance to how much you've learned and grown yourself. Wow. And I think that's really, really important. But the other fantastic Jim Rohn quote that I love, and I need to remind myself of it from time to time, is, don't wish life was easier, wish that you were better. And I think that's a good thought to end on.
that concludes this interview. So thanks for everyone that came on. Sorry if there was any connection issues. There'll be a replay of this recording on iTunes and audio and on YouTube, so look out for that. Thanks a lot for coming, Sam. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, I've learned a lot, and I know that everyone in Ben's Business Book Club and on Facebook has learned a lot as well.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you, everyone.